This is the Environmental Awareness Show here. I'm Dean Val here with Dean Kevin and Tim from Grants Pass, Oregon. We're discussing the environment, all things environment. I'm going to start by, I'm still continuing with my investigation on primary water. So I'm going to start with some common questions that you may want to know about primary water. And by the way, we're having Mark Burr on next week. He's with Primary Water Technologies. He invited him on. He's willing to come on and answer more questions and talk about it. He's been drilling all over the world, and he has the technology updated different technologies, the gamma seismic technologies to find the fissures in the rock to locate the water coming up through the rock, which is the primary water. So it'd be nice to have him on. In the meantime, here's just some questions here that you might have. Why haven't we heard, and this is from kind of a Wikipedia kind of site, Aquapedia. Why haven't we heard of primary water before? Primary water is not a new concept. Science has long considered and investigated Earth-generated water, most often referred to just as juvenile or magmatic water in the literature, and more recently as primordial or paleo water. Just think of the steam produced by a volcano and associated thermals, hot springs, and high-quality mineral waters, as well as the mountain sources of creeks, streams, and rivers. There is certainly water emerging from within our planet. The reason you have not heard about primary water has more to do with popular scientific theories about the origin of water on Earth, such as comets and asteroids. And with our focus on the water system, we see and are most familiar with the hydrologic cycle of water that includes runoff, evaporation, and precipitation. Much less attention has been paid to the water that comes from far beneath our feet. Our lack of understanding about primary water has led to massive reservoir and dam construction, as we have made great efforts to store and transport water, often long distances on the surface of the Earth. Yet, right below us has been a renewable, sustainable, non-aquifer water source ready to be tapped and used by humans, animals, farms, and industry. Next question. How do you know that it's not just aquifer water? Earth-generated primary water will often be chemically distinct from nearby aquifer wells, and when drilled, cased, and completed properly, are free of bacteria and contamination from the surface. Global Research Alliance of Ojai, California, has now drilled more than 100 wells in the arid Mara region of Tanzania, where no aquifer is deemed to exist in the volcanic formations in the Rift Valley. The GRA wells have an average depth of 200 feet and are free of bacteria, unlike all others in the district. The water rises under pressure, resulting in near-surface static level so that a simple submersible or even mechanical pump can bring this high-quality water to the surface. The water in all cases is potable directly from the well without need for filtration. The savings are enormous when compared to typical deep aquifer wells with expensive pumps and chemical filtration systems. Next question. Is this water ever a blend of primary sources and aquifers? A range of technologies exist to assist in locating primary water sources in all geological formations, regardless of soil or precipitation. Regarding the mixing of earth-generated and atmospheric water, primary water now more than ever considered to be the original source of our atmospheric water does mix in the Vitols and Fracking or aquifer near surface or aquifer zones where rainwater percolates and collects. However, in many formations, earth-generated water can reach near or to the surface without mixing or contamination, usually when contained and channeled in fissures or fractured rock formations. For this reason, care must be taken when drilling to seal off atmospheric sources and minimize mixing the surface contamination or the aquifer water. Next question. How do you locate and access primary water? Unlike traditional water well digging that seeks rainwater collected in aquifer basins and tubs, primary water precision drilling seeks fractures and fissures of the earth to release trapped earth-generated water, often originating as steam at great depth, which converts to liquid water as it cools in the crust and reaches the surface under pressure. Geohydrologists use a standard rotary air hammer rig with a strong compressor and almost always drill into bedrock, thus nicknamed rock drillers. A dual rotary drilling rig is preferred because it sets the well casing to considerable depth at the same time it drills the borehole and thereby seals off contamination. This is not fracking. Primary water pinpoint locating and precision drilling have very minimal environmental impact. Thousands of water wells are drilled around the world every day, and some 800,000 per year are drilled in the United States alone. Most are small bore residential wells with mainly agricultural production wells, preferring 12-inch diameter and larger. Primary water well drilling uses no chemicals, minimal mud or bentonite, and preferably 100% air in order to avoid contaminating the well while drilling, often allowing for open bore shafts in solid rock. Next question, why hasn't it been done before? It has been, not including the many natural springs and wells in use for thousands of years. Primary water sources are being located and utilized worldwide, usually locally and without fanfare. In 2013, in NUUU, Kenya, primary water geohydrologist Paul Power located a well funded by the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara North and Friends of Woni, Kenya International. In a region experiencing water shortages that continues to supply water to over 1,500 people, they refer to it as the magical well because many efforts by government geologists to find water there were unsuccessful, and the location chosen by Power was unconventional and required drilling into hard rock almost directly on the surface. In the U.S., primary water pioneer Stephen Reese located and drilled hundreds of wells, including a dozen wells that over 60 years later still provide 75% of water for California City in the middle of the Mojave Desert. His statement to a U.S. Senate Select Committee on National Water Resources in 1959 highlights his many successes worldwide in finding rock, fissure, or primary water, and he also refers to many accidental discoveries of primary water, including one in Manhattan in 1956 that produced over 2,000 gallons per minute and over 1 billion gallons of water in a 13-month period. This water was tested extensively to determine the source. The chemists certified that the water was not from the Hudson River, the very contaminated Hudson River, but was pure and fit for human consumption without filtration. Unable to determine the source of the water, officials considered the matter closed when the accidental spring was sealed off with the construction of the 12-story building and parking lot on top of the source. Then I'll do one more here. Can you drink it straight from the well? Primary water makes its way from the deep in the earth to the surface in the vapor via volcanoes and fumaroles and thousands of hydrothermal vents on the ocean floors, as well as through highly mineralized geysers, thermal springs, and mineral springs. It also produces most of our purest natural spring water, extracted, bottled, and sold by commercial water companies around the world. The FDA reduced the bottled water total dissolved solids limit from 1,000 to 500 parts per million, while allowing for the mineral water category to exceed 500 parts per million. This means that most primary water wells can be consumed directly at the source or bottled with minimal treatment as spring water or mineral water. However, in some formations, a TDS of even 4,000 ppm or more can produce mineral-rich yet perfectly pH-balanced water that provides crops and orchards with both high-quality earth-generated water and natural fertilizer. Thermal hot springs, often highly mineralized, have been sought out, often purposely located and drilled in and protected worldwide for their re-energizing and healing effects. Okay, so that's the question and answer period here today for primary water. And again, we're having Mark Burr on next week to interview him. I have a number of questions still about primary water I'd like to ask him. He's from the Southern California area. He's with Primary Water Technologies. And as I said before, he gave me an estimate down here once we get our funding to drill or to survey and find the primary water source. He estimated it under $10,000, $2,000 for his services to find it and supervise the drilling. We get our own driller, but total it would be probably under 10,000 because of the probably wouldn't have to go too deep because of the volcanic rock and what that implies here in northern Baja, Mexico, where surface water is pretty, well, at least the aquifers are pretty shallow. I mean, it's pretty easy to get to the aquifers. So we'll discuss this further with him next week about drilling into the rock, etc. So any comments on that before we go on?
I was going to ask in regards to the drilling for primary water. Do the individuals who drill for it have to have licenses and governmental permissions to do so? Would that be something that could represent a potential spanner in their works if there's interference from any governmental agencies or any other bodies that decide they're in a position where they can dictate whether people can actually drill or not?
Yeah, in California they put a ban on the drilling in the valley here, San Joaquin Valley. That was during Governor Jerry Brown's era, when there was a drought, there still is, but he put a ban on drilling, supposedly because it was going to deplete more and more of the aquifers. But of course, he wasn't talking about primary water. There's more regulations in the United States, but here in Mexico there is some. I understand it's a $300 license you need to go down to the city hall and get, and somebody comes out and just okays it. But we'll see how extensive that is. Many people here in Mexico just drill anyway, although there is a fine if you get caught. But out here in the rural part of Mexico, there's more leeway, you could say. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. But there are regulations, yeah, supposedly from the water resources governmental agencies. They usually want to control the water, of course, like they put fines on people collecting rainwater in Washington. They want to control the resources, water, air, anything mineral, anything food. That's their idea. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out here in Mexico when we get the funding. And Tim, do you have anything?
It's interesting how this primary water continues to be coming out as springs and things in the mountains for who knows, thousands of years. And it makes me wonder about how the earth, where you take out something like primary water continuously, that's being made in the process of the heats and whatever's going on to create it down in the depths of inside the earth, that it doesn't just keep making the sea rise higher and higher. It's I think when water continuously comes to the surface and goes into the ocean, that the ocean would keep swelling.
That was one of my questions for Mark next week. Yes, why in the oceans why aren't they overflowing? Why aren't they rising? Well, they are because it's supposedly global warming. But yeah, that was one of my questions next week. But yeah, the spring that we hit when we were up in Bucks Mountain, that was primary water. That was a continuous spring coming out of the mountain there. Okay, Kevin, give it over to you. Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm going to continue from where I left off last week in regards to fracking. As I said, it was an extensive article. I'm going to quickly go over what fracking is, just a few sentences before I start, so people are refamiliarised with what fracking is. Fracking is the process of drilling down into the earth before a high-pressure water mixture is directed at the rock to release the gas inside. Water, sand and chemicals are injected into the rock at high pressure, which allows the gas to flow out to the head of the well. The process can be carried out vertically, or more commonly, by drilling horizontally to the rock layer, which can create new pathways to release gas, or used to extend existing channels. The term fracking refers to how the rock is fractured apart by the high-pressure mixture. Fracking uses huge amounts of water which must be transported to the site at significant environmental cost. And so the article continues from where I left off last week, which was: the state of Colorado commissioned scientific studies, then last year overhauled its oil and gas oversight to prioritize public health. Now, most wells there cannot be closer than 2,000 feet from buildings. and the state is required to ensure environmental justice for disproportionately impacted communities by giving them a say in the permitting process. Texas went the opposite direction. After the city of Denton tried to outlaw fracking within its boundaries in 2014, the state legislature overwhelmingly adopted a law that prohibits local governments from banning drilling or passing any restriction that isn't commercially reasonable. Since then, Texas localities that want to say no to gas companies have faced the prospect of expensive court battles. Still, over the last year, Arlington has started to push back. Last June, when the Arlington City Council convened to discuss Total's bid to drill and frack 3 additional wells behind Vincent's daycare, Mother's Heart, the Arlington residents took to the street, and Vincent would ask, "Can you guarantee me 100% that you're not putting any of us in harm's way?" Mayor Jeff Williams opened the evening meeting. Vincent was among the first to speak against the permit. "Our clients are about 80% African American and about 20% Latino," she said. "Can you guarantee me 100% that you're not putting any of us in harm's way now or in the future?" Council member Marvin Sutton pressed Total on whether the company would monitor the air near Mother's Heart to see whether young children were being exposed to toxic fumes. "No, we don't do the air monitoring," said Kevin Strausser, Total's senior manager for government relations and public affairs. "We rely on the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for that." However, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality spokesperson Gary Rasp told Reveal that they do not monitor air emissions at individual drilling sites. Strausser said Total controls air pollution in many ways, by drilling with electric instead of diesel rigs and checking monthly for leaks. "There's no one better in the business," he said. "I appreciate the residents around the site, and particularly the school that's just to the north of us, and I feel like we've cohabited there for the last 10 years without any issues." Ranjana Bandari, executive director of Livable Arlington, a volunteer organization that opposes urban drilling, explained how she went door to door before the pandemic, alerting Vincent and others about Total's plan to drill more wells. "We discovered that nobody was aware of this," she said. "We did the job that Total should have done." But council member Helen Moyes, a longtime supporter of the oil and gas industry, warned that Arlington's hands were tied. "As a council, we are aware that fracking is not a desirable activity any longer in a city," she said. "But Arlington was happy to take millions of dollars from gas companies in the past, and is now living with the consequences." Fracking began here on the Barnett Shale, and communities on the shale did enjoy an influx of cash in the early years of the fracking boom some 15 years ago. In Arlington, oil royalties funded $100 million Tomorrow Foundation, which awards several $1 million a year to programs that do such things as provide medical care to infants or install energy-saving streetlights. But the economic windfall forecast in industry-funded reports never materialized. Most of the royalties and profits went to companies or absentee owners of mineral rights, and the potential costs, those mostly stay with and in the local community, according to Matthew Fry, an associate professor of geography and environment at the University of North Texas, who has researched the impact of drilling in the Barnett Shale. The industry does provide thousands of local jobs, but they now make up less than 1% of employment in the county, and today gas production generates less than 1% of county tax revenue, according to industry and government data, a third of its peak. Perhaps the political calculus was beginning to shift. That night, the council did something it had rarely done before. It voted 6-3 to reject Total's plans to drill behind Mother's Heart. Decades ago, updates to the Federal Clean Air Act required companies to install modern pollution control devices whenever they build or modify large facilities, such as refineries, incinerators, and power plants. It slashed pollution from power plants and other big polluters, as well as cars and trucks, vastly improving air quality in many metropolitan areas. But the law has a blind spot when it comes to oil and gas sites. It considers each well site as a separate source of pollution, even in cases like Arlington, where one company, Total, operates 33, each with multiple wells. This surgical loophole that no other industry in America has enjoyed prevents sprawling well sites from being considered together, said John Walk, a former official with the Environmental Protection Agency, who is now a lawyer at the Natural Resources Defense Council. It has incentivized the spreading of wellheads like toxic spores across many communities. The Obama administration was the first to regulate air pollution released by drilling and fracking. The EPA, under his leadership, regulated volatile organic compounds in 2012 and methane, a potent greenhouse gas, in 2016. After drilling, companies were required to capture the gas immediately or burn it in a flare rather than release it into the air. Companies were also required to hunt for leaks twice a year and fix them. But the Obama rules regulated only new wells, grandfathering in hundreds of thousands of others, including most of the wells in the Barnett Shale. And those regulations had barely gone into effect when they were gutted by the next president, Donald Trump. NASA detected this methane leak in a California oil field last summer. The oil company in question subsequently confirmed and repaired the leak. These regulatory gaps have left much of the oversight of drilling and fracking in states' hands. Some states, such as New York, Vermont, and Maryland, have banned it. Colorado and Wyoming imposed strict rules. Others, like Texas, have given substantial leeway to industry. Texas does the minimum of what it has to do to meet federal standards, said Cyrus Reed, interim director of the Sierra Club's Texas chapter. We've always argued they should be much more stringent where you have oil and gas mixing with people in close proximity. In Grand Prairie, a gas company had reported no leaks at its well site in 5 years. An independent tester found 22 in 15 minutes. 2 agencies in Texas regulate oil and gas production: the Texas Railroad Commission, which permits oil and gas drilling and inspects for groundwater contamination every 5 years, and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TCEQ, which regulates air pollution. It's responsible for ensuring that the state meets federal air pollution standards for smog, ozone, and soot, but leaves routine inspection of wells to gas companies like Total. The agency, which conducts inspections only in response to complaints or red flags in gas companies' self-reports, monitors a tiny fraction of Tarrant County's 4,001 wells. The TCEQ conducted 23 inspections here in fiscal year 2019 and 134 in fiscal year 2020, according to Gary Rasp, the TCEQ spokesperson. The TCEQ can set individualized emission limits as part of the permitting process, but the agency offers a leniency to many companies, allowing most well sites in Tarrant County, including some of Total's, to obtain a permit by rule. That status allows companies to avoid not only individualized emission limits, but also public hearings. Some communities on the Barnett Shale have stepped in to fill the regulatory gaps. Kenneth Tram's company, Modern Geosciences, has been contracted by 5 municipalities to inspect well sites for leaks. In one case, in Grand Prairie, a gas company reported no leaks at its well site over the course of 5 years, yet in a 2015 audit, Tram's company found 22 leaks in 15 minutes. A lot of people are using instruments that honestly couldn't see numbers that would matter, Tram said, yet they derive a comfort from the performance of an inspection. The inadequate inspections come at a cost. He recalls visiting a site in Denton in 2018, where he said his instruments detected a catastrophic failure. Something on one of their tanks is actually blowing out, he said. So it's immediate lockdown.
While you were reading, I looked up benzene and toluene. Those are the two chemicals they use in the fracking process, and they're both cancer-causing, both very toxic, especially when you combine them. And there's no federal regulation. Like you said, there's no regulation against their use, so they're being let loose in the aquifers and the soil, and people are getting contaminated too from them. You know, health hazard to the people in the water and the environment around them. So it's just funny how these things are not funny, but these things are just, there's a big loophole here for things, whereas other things that are safe, you know, the government outlaws, but these dangerous chemicals and process of fracking are okay because, well, maybe the lobbyists are in Washington. They have a good lobby groups, the oil companies, and they just get this thing through, finalized. And I see the fracking too is for locating oil too, as well as gas. So that was new to me too. And Tim, you have anything?
Yeah, it's interesting how the fracking isn't just for gas, the natural gas. It does produce the oil too in the earth. It forces the oil that's in the area into the wells that they punch to. And we've heard about all the little earthquakes and things that take place in some of the states here that are doing the fracking. And we hear of some of the areas where the water quality is being affected by the stuff that they put down into the earth to cause this super pressure. And it takes a massive pressure to force the stuff to be freed from the rock, the fractures in the rock, where the seepage fills every fracture that's going on in the shale's all real fractury stuff. It's cracks and cracks and cracks and cracks. So they found a way to get that gas and oil that way. And for a whole lot of people in certain areas, they've made fortunes on their property for this new way to get stuff that the world is using to get it out. But right now, I'd say that here in Southwest Oregon, on a nice clear beautiful morning after this rain that we've had and stuff, you wouldn't know that any impurities were hardly in the air at all or on the ground. Just kind of a bunch of the stuff is invisible to everybody with our physical senses, what's really happening, and we can't see what's really going on down there in the fracking areas, the depths that it penetrates into the earth, and the more disturbance that takes place in the earth in certain areas, if there's any weak spots, then the earth will move. So we'll see in time how the towns and things around the fracking areas that are real big, like up in Canada, Edmonton and stuff, that I wouldn't be surprised if the earth decides to really change a bit, surface in that area.
What's the situation in Oregon with the fracking operations?
Oregon doesn't have any of the fracking that I know of going. We don't have oil deposits, any discovery of oil or gas in Oregon. It comes from Canada or eastern country states east from Oregon, like North Dakota, and was why the price of oil and gasoline for everybody in the country dropped a whole lot when they hit that North Dakota deposit. Hunt Brothers or whoever they were, they produced so much by this modern fracking effort that it dropped the price of the barrels of oil and made the price of gas stay down for a while. So I don't know what's going on anymore. I guess they've just decided, all of them, when they get together, all the oil billionaires, to see how much they can get out of everybody for using their stuff that they seem to have ways of getting that probably are going to show up as not beneficial for the environment, because we don't see what's going on down inside the earth in the areas. We just see what happens on the surface.
Yeah, if any of you ever come across anything related to the underground tunnels and the drilling, fracking, drilling for wells, I'd be interested in knowing about that, how it relates. And I mean, there's a massive underground tunnel system under the earth. So I know when they do those drillings for the tunnels, I mean, they're going to be hitting water. I mean, and other, oil, gas, etc. So if you'll find anything about that, it'd be interesting to know if anybody's researched that.
Yeah, I have another article here, which I think is a good example of the sustained attack on our natural resources, in specifically water. And this could be a case that could apply anywhere all over the world. But this was referred to as Flint, Michigan's lead-tainted water crisis. The following information was sourced from RevealNews.org newsletter titled Key Moments in Flint, Michigan's Lead-Tainted Water Crisis. The Flint water crisis began in 2014 when the city began taking water from the Flint River without treating it properly, contaminating it with lead. Here's a look at some key moments since then. April 2014. To save money, Flint begins drawing water from the Flint River for its 100,000 residents. The move is considered temporary while the city waits to connect to a new regional water system. Residents immediately complain about the water's smell, taste and appearance, and they raise health concerns, reporting rashes, hair loss, and other problems. January 2015. Detroit offers to reconnect Flint to its water system, but Flint leaders insist the water is safe. September the 24th, 2015. A group of doctors urges Flint to stop using the Flint River after finding high levels of lead in children's blood. State regulators insist the water is safe. September the 29th, 2015. Then Governor Rick Snyder pledges to take action in response to the lead levels. The first acknowledgement by the state that lead is a problem. October 2015. Snyder announces the state will spend $1 million to buy water filters and test water in Flint public schools, and days later calls for Flint to go back to using water from Detroit's system. December the 29th, 2015. Snyder accepts the resignation of Department of Environmental Quality Director Dan Wyant and apologizes for what occurred in Flint. January the 5th, 2016. Snyder declares a state of emergency in Flint. The same day, federal officials confirm they are investigating. A week later, the Michigan National Guard begins helping to distribute bottled water and filters. January the 14th, 2016. Snyder, a Republican, asks the Obama administration for a major disaster declaration and more federal aid. The White House provides aid and an emergency declaration on January the 16th, but not the disaster declaration. January the 15th, 2016. Then Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuett begins an independent review. March the 23rd, 2016. A governor-appointed panel concludes that the state of Michigan is fundamentally accountable for the crisis because of decisions made by environmental regulators. April the 20th, 2016. 2 state officials and a local official are charged with evidence tampering and other crimes in the state attorney general's investigation. The first charges to come from the probe. August the 14th, 2016. The federal emergency declaration ends, but state officials say work continues to fix the drinking water system. December the 10th, 2016. Congress approves a wide-ranging bill to authorize water projects across the country, including $170 million to address lead in Flint's drinking water. December the 16th, 2016. Congressional Republicans close a year-long investigation, faulting both state officials and the Environmental Protection Agency. December the 20th, 2016. Schuett charges former emergency managers Darnell Early and Gerald Ambrose with multiple felonies for their failure to protect Flint residents from health hazards caused by contaminated water. He also charges Early, Ambrose, and 2 Flint City employees with felony counts of false pretenses and conspiracy to commit false pretenses in the issuance of bonds to pay for part of the water project that led to the crisis. February the 17th, 2017. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission issues a report that finds systematic racism is at the core of problems that caused the water crisis in the majority black city. March the 27th, 2017. Water lines in Flint homes will be replaced under a landmark deal approved by a judge. June the 14th, 2017, Michigan Health and Human Services Director Nick Lyon is accused of failing to alert the public about an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease in the Flint area that some experts believe resulted from the poorly treated water. He and 4 others are charged with involuntary manslaughter. The state's chief medical officer, Dr. Eden Wells, is charged with obstruction of justice and lying to an investigator. April 2018, Snyder ends Flint water distribution, saying the city's tap water has improved. July the 19th, 2018. A federal watchdog calls on the EPA to strengthen its oversight of state drinking water systems nationwide and to respond more quickly to public health emergencies like Flint's. The EPA says it agrees with the Inspector General's recommendations and is adopting them expeditiously. January the 7th, 2019, Leanne Schechter Smith, Michigan's former drinking water regulator, pleads no contest to a misdemeanor, disturbance of a lawful meeting in the Flint water investigation. Smith had been facing felony charges, including involuntary manslaughter. April the 16th, 2019, Todd Flood, a special prosecutor who spent 3 years leading a criminal investigation of the Flint water scandal, is fired in the fallout from the discovery of 23 boxes of records in the basement of a state building. June the 13th, 2019, prosecutors drop all criminal charges against 8 people in the Flint water scandal and pledge to start the investigation from scratch. Solicitor General Fardwar Hamoud, who took control of the investigation in January 2019 after the election of a new Attorney General, says all available evidence was not pursued by the previous team of prosecutors. July the 29th, 2020, the Michigan Supreme Court says Flint residents whose health and homes were harmed can proceed with a lawsuit against officials for decisions that caused the scandal, a crucial procedural step in long-running litigation. August the 20th, 2020, a $600 million deal between the state and residents of Flint harmed by lead-tainted water is announced after more than 2 years of negotiations. January the 12th, 2021, the AP reports that former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, his health director, and other ex-officials have been told they're being charged after a new investigation of the Flint water scandal.
My understanding is they took the Flint River water instead of the treated sewage water, which neither of them sound really great, but that's where the problem began. Is that correct? They started using the Flint River water, which killed many, I don't know how many people it supposedly killed from there was a Legionnaires disease breakout and other toxic cancer and other things that happened.
Yeah, the Flint River was contaminated with lead, and they were using that instead. And I said it seemed to be a situation that went on for a number of years. Obviously, multiple millions of dollars were involved, and of course, where money is involved, it tends to take precedence over the health of people. And so there were, and so yeah, it sort of culminated with theoretically the situation being resolved, but obviously at the expense of countless numbers of people over the years and their health and such. And that's just an example of much by way of those sort of situations that are obviously going on continuously all over the world, a lot of which probably are just going on unreported and probably unrealised. And it's only when some individuals step up, like people like Sheriff Mack and people of that nature do step up and point out these things, that it draws attention to it, and then they have to be addressed. But if people don't point them out or make a noise or a fuss, or then these things will just continue on as they do, and people's health will continue to be compromised, and so on and so forth.
Kevin, sounds like you really brought out the corruption within the local governments. And that's how these guys protect you. You can't get them financially to them personally. If you could, they would be a little bit more judicial, I think. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly the money. When I was running for city council in Cupertino, California, I mean, I know the past history of Cupertino where, Apple, who's the guy with Apple? Not Gates, but the other guy came in to one of the meetings.
Jobs.
Steve Jobs, thank you. Yeah, to promote, building his huge spaceship office building there in Cupertino. And of course, he got an okay because of all the tax revenue from it. But it's just politics. I mean, even from that level, city level and on, it's playing politics, power grabs, money. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in here. So it could be better. That's why we're here, to see if we can offer another position for people in self-sustaining communities where people can just, without the encumbrance of higher-ups, govern themselves in their own communities depending on their particulars of their environment.
I thought it was strange that all he got was only 600 million. Now that's just pittance. And the amount of people that were actually harmed by this stuff. These guys just get off for nothing. It's just too bad.
Well, the system is rigged, so I expect that.
Terribly rigged. Terribly rigged.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. So we do the NUUU, which is our connection to something very real, and it goes like this. NUUU. Tim?
NUUU.
Ronald?
NUUU.
Kevin?
You.